A desperate single mother was publicly humiliated at a baby boutique just because she couldn't afford a crib, until a millionaire walked in, and both their lives changed forever. The cold wind cut sharply against Megan's sharp skin as she clutched her 2-year-old daughter Isabel tightly to her chest. The little girl slept wrapped in a threadbare blanket that barely protected her from the freezing air. Megan's thin jacket offered little warmth, and her feet ached inside worn-out sneakers soaked from the damp streets. The cracked sidewalks of the graffiti-stained neighborhood mirrored Megan's life. Unstable, difficult, full of fear and struggle. But amid all that bleakness, something caught her eye. A dazzling, brightly lit baby boutique shimmered like it belonged to another world. Her tired eyes locked onto the most beautiful crib she had ever seen. White wood with gold details, soft satin bows on the sides, and a delicate lace mosquito net that looked like it was woven from clouds. For a moment, she forgot the cold, the overdue bills, and the musty scent of the tiny room she called home. That crib. It was everything she had dreamed of for her little girl. Almost unconsciously, Megan stepped forward, pushing open the boutique's glass door gently, as if afraid her mere presence might break something. The warmth inside enveloped her. A sweet mix of lavender, polished wood, and freshly laundered baby clothes filled the air. Everything sparkled. Each item was perfectly arranged, labeled with price tags more elegant than anything in Megan's life. And that's when she noticed the saleswoman, tall, blonde, perfectly made up. Her eyes narrowed as she took in Megan's worn jeans, tattered coat, messy hair, and the ragged blanket wrapped around Isabel. Crossing her arms, the woman gave a smile that was more mockery than kindness and walked over. "Good afternoon," she said with a syrupy tone. "May I help you?" Megan tried not to shrink under her gaze. I just wanted to ask how much that crib in the window costs. The white one with gold." The woman raised a brow, looked her up and down again, and sighed audibly. "That one?" she said, pointing, pretending to be surprised. "Maybe you didn't realize, but this store isn't exactly for everyone." Megan blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" The woman gave a short, poisonous laugh. "I'm trying to save you from being embarrassed, okay?" she said, tossing her hair. "This is a premium boutique. We sell specialty items for people who can afford them." Her gaze dropped to the frayed blanket. "Honestly, I think you're in the wrong place." Megan's face burned with humiliation. I I only wanted to know the price." The woman rolled her eyes. "Fine. It's $4,000, she said coldly, spitting the number like venom. "We do have cheaper options, though I'm not sure they'd be suitable." She let the sentence trail off, her expression one of someone who just spotted trash on the sidewalk. Megan's body trembled with shame and helplessness. Her eyes welled with tears. I, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother anyone," she said, voice cracking. She turned, clutching Isabel tighter, heart pounding, tears blurring her vision as she pushed open the door. And that's when everything changed. Just as she stepped out, she bumped into someone, tall, strong, well-dressed. The scent of an expensive woody cologne filled her senses. She looked up and met a pair of deep blue eyes filled with surprise and concern. The man, dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, gently steadied her by the arms. "Hey," he said, his voice deep and calm. "Are you okay?" Megan quickly wiped her tears, trying to hold it together, but a sob escaped. "No, I just—" She took a shaky breath. "I just wanted to know how much a crib costs. I just wanted to give my daughter a little comfort." Her voice broke again. She humiliated me. Said I didn't belong in there." The man's expression shifted from concern to steel. He turned sharply toward the boutique, his eyes locked on the saleswoman, who now looked pale. "You," he said, his voice firm and cold. "You're fired, right now." The woman's eyes widened in panic. "Mr. Padette, please, no, it was a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" he said, stepping forward. His presence filled the entire store like a storm. "You thought you could humiliate a mother in my store?" he said, voice sharp and commanding. "In my company?" The saleswoman stammered. "Sir, I've worked here for—" He raised a hand, silencing her instantly. "And you'll never work in any store in this city again. Not if I have a say in it." Gather your things. Leave. Now. Megan stood frozen, stunned. Wait, your store? The man adjusted his tie, then looked back at her with a kind, warm smile that sharply contrasted the glare he'd given the saleswoman. Philip Padet, he said, extending his hand. I'm the owner of Padet Baby Stores. Megan shook his hand hesitantly, feeling the warmth of his skin against the cold that still clung to her. I had no idea, she whispered. Philip knelt slightly, bringing himself to Isabel's level. His voice turned soft, gentle enough to melt frost. And you, little one, he said sweetly. You're going to choose any crib you want. It's a gift. Megan's eyes widened. She shook her head quickly. No, I can't accept that. I only wanted to check the prices. Maybe pick a simpler one later. I'd figure out a way. But Philip shook his head, smiling gently. No, Megan. Today you won't worry about money, and you won't ever let anyone make you feel like you're less than. His voice was steady, kind. And it won't be a simple crib. It'll be the best we have, because that's what your daughter deserves. He reached out and softly touched one of Isabel's tiny hands, poking out of the blanket. She's beautiful, like a little angel, he whispered. His eyes softened. And no angel should sleep without comfort, without safety, without love. Megan's tears began to fall again, but this time they weren't from shame. They were from something else, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She hugged Isabel tightly, looking up into the eyes of this elegant stranger who, in mere moments, had changed everything. And for the first time in many years, Megan believed her life might actually be turning around. The boutique bustled quietly as employees carefully wrapped the crib. It was treated like a precious jewel, each golden detail covered in bubble wrap, every piece carefully packed into padded boxes. Philip remained beside Megan and little Isabel, who had now woken up and was curiously watching everything with wide blue eyes so much like her mother's. Philip couldn't look away from the child. She clutched her mother's finger, wiggling her little foot with innocent joy, as if sensing something magical was happening. Bending slightly, Philip smiled and gently stroked Isabel's soft hair. She really is an angel, he murmured almost to himself. Then he straightened, adjusting his tie again, and looked at Megan seriously. Megan, can I ask you something? He said, voice calm but intent. Where do you live? Her face faltered. The moisture returned to her eyes. She hesitated, shame tightening around her throat. For a moment she thought about lying, pretending she lived somewhere nicer. But then she looked at Isabel's foot moving gently against her and couldn't bring herself to speak anything but the truth. Jefferson neighborhood, 18th Street, she said quietly, near the alley, by the old market. Philip went still. His expression changed. His eyebrows furrowed and his face lost color. That place? He said, louder than he meant to. His voice was filled with disbelief. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly shaken. That neighborhood's not safe. He stepped aside, rubbing his chin, clearly struggling with the thought. Megan lowered her eyes. I don't have a choice, she said softly. It's all I can afford. It's small, it's cramped, but it's what we have. The quiet in her voice masked a heavy pain, one that came from carrying life's burdens alone for far too long. Philip didn't wait another second. Every fiber in his body moved with sudden purpose. Number, that's not okay. He turned swiftly and called out, Robert, Carlos, take this crib now. And that's not all. Add the orthopedic baby mattress, the full bedding set, the mosquito net, and yes, bring the white wardrobe too. Install it today. Sir, one of the employees said, surprised, would you like us to include anything else? If I remember anything else on the way, I'll let you know. Philip replied firmly. Now move. No delays. Megan stood there, unable to speak, unable to move, staring at him as though she were watching a dream unfold in front of her. Philip, you don't have to do this, she said, holding Isabel tightly to her chest, her voice nearly a whisper. He turned toward her again, placing his hands gently on her narrow shoulders, looking into her eyes with such steady kindness it nearly knocked the breath out of her. This isn't about obligation, he said gently. It's about doing what's right. His voice never wavered. You and this little princess deserve more than what life has tried to give you. And as long as I have the power to change that, I will." Megan pressed her lips together, trying to hold back the overwhelming emotions. But the tears came again, uncontrollable, rolling down her cheeks freely. She didn't know if this was real, if she was dreaming, if the exhaustion was playing tricks on her. The van carrying the crib and furniture made its way slowly through pothole-filled streets, while Philip followed in his car, personally overseeing every detail. Every red light, every bump, every forgotten corner of the city seemed to awaken memories in Philip. Memories he didn't realize still lived inside him. Philip got out of the car first. Megan, somewhat embarrassed, pushed open the creaky old door of the rented room. The smell of dampness hit them before it even fully opened. Inside, peeling paint clung to walls stained with water. The floor was bare cement, only slightly softened by a threadbare rug. In the corner, a thin mattress rested directly on the floor, propped up by worn pillows. Philip stopped in the doorway. He couldn't go in. Something gripped his chest, sharp and familiar. That smell, that cold, that emptiness. It was like being pulled backward in time. He'd been here before. Not this exact place, but somewhere painfully similar. In his mind's eye, he saw his mother again, holding him close in her arms, wrapped in a blanket just as thin as the one covering Isabel now. Her voice echoed through memory. "One day, my son, one day we'll get out of here. I swear." And she had. But the pain of those days hadn't vanished. It had merely settled deep inside. And now it flared again, blended with something stronger, a fierce determination. No child should have to live like this. Not ever again. The employees began unloading boxes, filling the tiny space with movement and purpose. Sounds of tools, packaging being torn open, and furniture coming together filled the room. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the room began to change. Color, warmth, life breathing into its once lifeless walls. Philip watched it all, but his eyes kept returning to Megan. She held Isabel close, trying and failing not to cry. These were no longer tears of pain alone. They were tears of disbelief, of gratitude, and a fragile kind of hope she'd long forgotten. Then amid the flurry, Philip asked a question, softly, carefully. "And her father?" The room stilled. Even the workers seemed to sense the shift. Tools paused midair. Megan lowered her head, holding Isabel tighter. Her breath caught in her throat, like someone about to plunge into icy water. "He," her voice cracked, "he passed away, shortly after Isabel was born." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in fabric. Slowly, reverently, she unwrapped it. Inside was a simple chain with an aged metal pendant, an anchor, its edges worn smooth by time. Despite its age, it gleamed with significance. "This," Megan's voice trembled, "this is all I have left of him." Philip stepped closer, drawn to it. The moment he saw the pendant, something jolted inside him. His entire body tensed. That anchor, that exact design. He knew it. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I've seen one. Just like it." Megan clutched it protectively. "What?" she asked, heart pounding. Philip swallowed hard, almost afraid to speak. What was his name?" She hesitated, then, through tears, answered, "David Harper." The name hit Philip like a blow. He staggered back slightly, hand to his mouth, his mind racing. "David," he whispered, eyes wide. "It can't be." He looked at Megan, then at Isabel, then at the chain. "Are you sure?" "David Harper?" Megan nodded slowly. "He was my husband, my love, my life." Her voice broke again. "He worked until the very end, but he got sick. Too fast. I couldn't." She covered her mouth to stifle a sob. Philip closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and suddenly the puzzle pieces of his past locked into place. "David Harper," he repeated, awe in his voice. "He worked for my mother. Actually, he was more than that. He was one of her best. She thought of him as family." He pointed to the chain. "She only gave those to people she truly trusted, people she considered part of the Padat family." Silence fell. Only the faint sound of the crib being assembled filled the space. Soft, careful, almost reverent. Suddenly, Philip understood. What he'd felt in the store wasn't just empathy. It wasn't just kindness. It was something deeper. A debt. A sacred debt of gratitude, of honor, to a man who had once helped shape the legacy Philip now carried. And now that man's daughter and granddaughter stood before him. And he knew. Everything had changed. "You're not going to live here anymore." His voice was calm, solid, unquestionable. Megan looked up, stunned, as though the walls had just shifted around her. Instinctively, she pulled Isabel closer, needing to shield herself from a dream that felt too dangerous to believe. "What?" she whispered, barely able to speak. "No, Philip, I can't accept that. You've already done so much." Her voice trembled, not only from the cold, but from the emotional flood threatening to drown her. Gratitude, disbelief, fear, hope. But Philip didn't step back. He crossed his arms, drew a steady breath, and looked straight into her eyes. "You can," he said, "and you will." He moved closer, voice gentler now, though no less firm. "Consider this, an extension of what my mother always did. She looked after those who looked after her, who looked after us. And your husband, David, he did that. You're doing that now, for the most precious thing he left behind." His eyes softened as he looked down at Isabel, who was tugging gently at the edge of her mother's coat, completely unaware of the moment's weight. "So no arguments," Philip said, voice low but resolute. "This is happening. It's the right thing to do." Megan pressed her lips together, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. Her chest felt too small to hold everything she was feeling. She had spent so long being told no, ignored, rejected, surviving through closed doors and cold shoulders, that hearing such a firm yes felt unreal. It was a breath of miracle in the storm that had been her life. 2 days passed. 2 days where Megan barely slept, caught between anxiety and disbelief, clinging to the fragile hope she dared not nurture too much. She kept telling herself it might all be a misunderstanding, some fleeting kindness that would vanish with the dawn. Then on the morning of the second day, a knock came at the old wooden door. It echoed louder than anything she had heard in weeks. Holding Isabel close, she opened it. There he was, Philip Padet, gray wool coat, dark scarf around his neck, and a smile on his face. But it was his eyes that said everything. There was something in them, relief, excitement, and a strange glowing happiness even he didn't fully understand. "I found it," he said simply, as if announcing he'd uncovered a lost treasure. Megan blinked. "What? The apartment?" Philip's smile widened. "It's not a palace or anything fancy, but it's safe, clean, and it's yours for as long as you need." He extended a hand. "Come, I want to show you." The walk there was silent. Megan didn't know whether to speak, cry, or simply try to memorize every second. It felt like she was carving this moment into her soul, something she never wanted to forget. When they arrived, she stepped out of the car and froze. The building was modest, a 3-story structure with a fresh coat of beige paint, white-framed windows, and flower boxes on several balconies. Next to it, a small park with wooden benches and a children's playground. Isabel noticed it first. "Mommy!" she beamed, pointing with her little arms. "Swing! Swing!" For the first time in weeks, Megan smiled. Really smiled. Philip unlocked the front door with a brand new silver key and led them up 2 flights of stairs. He paused at door 203, took a breath, and looked at Megan. "Ready?" She nodded, still in disbelief. He turned the key and opened the door. The scent hit her first. Fresh wood, soft lavender, and something else. Something like hope. Megan stepped inside slowly, eyes wide. The apartment was small, but to her it looked like another world. The living room had polished light wood floors that glowed in the natural light from a large window. White lace curtains danced in the gentle breeze. A 2-seater sofa in soft gray sat against the wall, with petrol blue cushions that invited you to sink in. A fluffy beige rug stretched across the floor. Nearby, a sleek piece of furniture held space for a TV and neatly arranged books and plants. In the open kitchen, Gleaming white tiles sparkled beneath hanging lights. Built-in cabinets framed a spotless sink and a compact modern fridge. On the little table, a vase of fresh flowers. Someone had even thought of that. Flowers? Megan's knees nearly gave out. There were two bedrooms. The first, small but perfectly arranged, a double bed with white lace detailed sheets, a mirrored wardrobe, and a dresser with golden handles. Everything smelled of fresh laundry. The second room stole her breath. The crib. That crib, the one from the store. A cloud-shaped rug, a white nursing chair, a shelf with children's books and stuffed animals. On the wall, star and moon stickers that shimmered faintly in the daylight. Megan brought a hand to her mouth, but the tears broke free. She hugged Isabel tightly, and with her free hand, gripped Philip's arm like an anchor. Like if she let go, she might float away and never come back. "Philip!" Her voice cracked. She couldn't finish. She just sobbed, shaking her head. "I don't even know how to thank you. This is more than I could ever dream of." Philip didn't speak. He just wrapped his arms around her, holding her, shielding her like a lighthouse in a storm. Something shifted inside him, something he couldn't name. It was more than kindness, more than duty or empathy. It was something deeper, something truer, a warmth he'd forgotten existed. "You don't need to thank me," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "You won't have to worry anymore, Megan. Not about this. I promise." He gently stroked her hair, closing his eyes for a moment. "I'll get you a position at the company," he continued. "And if you want, my mother, she would love to take care of Isabel while you work." Megan pulled back, blinking. She would? Really?" Philip took her hand, squeezing it. "Not only would she," he said, eyes shining, "she told me herself. It's a debt of the heart. Your daughter? She carries part of our story now. And that's not a small thing, Megan. That's everything." Megan placed a trembling hand over her chest, overwhelmed. Isabel, sensing the energy in the room, nestled into her arms and looked up at both of them with wide, knowing eyes. Philip looked at them and smiled, a real, deep smile, one he hadn't felt in years. "From now on," he said softly, brushing his thumb over Megan's hand, "everything begins to change." And in that moment, none of them knew exactly where that change would lead. But for the first time, Megan felt something she'd long since stopped believing in. Safe. She and Isabel had found it, what they never imagined they could. A harbor, a beginning, and maybe, just maybe, something more. A few days later, Philip kept his promise. He called Megan to the flagship store, the same one with the shining windows where their paths had first crossed. But this time, there were no judging looks, no whispering clerks, only open doors. There were no cutting words this time, no judgment, no pity, just a future, and above all, respect. "Megan," Philip said, his voice firm yet welcoming, "I talked to the manager. There's a sales position here. It's yours if you want it." Her eyes filled instantly. She clenched her hands in her lap, trembling from her fingers all the way to her chest. "Philip, I don't even know how to—" She took a breath, blinking hard. "I don't even know where to start thanking you." He gave her that smile, the one she was beginning to recognize. The smile that only appeared when he allowed himself to be more than the serious businessman the world expected. "Start by accepting," he said gently. "We'll figure out the rest along the way." That day, Megan went home floating. After so long being invisible, pushed to the margins, here she was, recognized, valued, given a real chance. On her first day at work, Megan arrived early, long before the store opened. She wore the outfit Philip had given her, a spotless white shirt, crisp black pants, and comfortable yet elegant shoes. Around her neck, a new badge hung, a small rectangle of plastic, but heavier than any gold necklace. It wasn't just her name. It was a new identity. From her very first customer, it was clear. Megan was born for this. "Good morning," she said, her voice warm, her smile genuine. "Can I help you?" It wasn't just a question. It was an invitation, an invisible hug. Megan crouched to speak with children, offered them toys while their mothers shopped, made gentle suggestions, spun stories about the products like fairy tales. She made people feel seen, heard, understood. It wasn't rare for mothers, tired, burdened, anxious, to break down a little. I know, Megan would say, holding their hands. I know what it's like to want to give everything to your child and feel like you can't. But look, you're here, choosing with love. That already makes you a wonderful mom. At first, her colleagues were skeptical. Megan had no prestigious degrees, no glowing resume. But within weeks, she became the most beloved saleswoman in the store. Customers asked for her by name, waited in line for her, returned again and again, just for her, the girl who understands us. And somehow, without fully realizing it, Philip began watching her more and more. He told himself it was business, just checking on the floor. But often he simply stood at a distance, arms crossed, watching. The way she adjusted her pant leg when she crouched to talk to a child. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she laughed. The way she bit her lower lip when solving a difficult problem. She wasn't just good, she was extraordinary. Every afternoon, without fail, Philip insisted on driving her home. The reason was always the same. Isabel was with his mother, and as her guardian, it made sense. But over time, they both realized, without saying it out loud, this was no longer obligation. It was desire, a quiet wish to stretch the day just a little longer, to be near, to feel something. The car rides became ritual, small conversations, stifled laughter, silences that said more than words ever could. You know, Megan said one evening, looking out the window as the city lights flickered to life, sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking, this is all a dream. Philip gave her a glance, one hand steady on the wheel. What if it is? He asked. She smiled just slightly, looking at him out of the corner of her eye. Then it would be the best dream of my life. She dropped her gaze, suddenly self-conscious. Philip gripped the wheel, hiding the smile tugging at his lips. Then I hope you never wake up, he said quietly, almost as if to himself. Another day, as a light drizzle began to fall, he asked, voice casual but eyes sharp, if you could choose anything, any future, what would it look like? Oh, my dear. She stepped closer, tucking a loose strand of Megan's hair behind her ear in a gesture so motherly, so gentle, it nearly made Megan cry. You might fool yourself, but you're not fooling me. Megan laughed nervously, burying her face in her hands. Oh my God, she whispered, cheeks blazing. Relax, Eleanor said, turning back to the counter, pretending not to push further, but tossing one final line over her shoulder like bait. Love doesn't always come the way we expect. Sometimes it arrives when we're not looking and from places we never imagined. When they returned to the living room, Megan stopped short. Philip was sitting cross-legged on the floor, Isabel in his lap. He gently rocked her side to side, tickling her belly. The little girl laughed so hard her chubby hands flailed in defense. That's not fair, Uncle Philip, she squealed in toddler babble. Not fair? He gasped, feigning outrage. Then take more tickles. He lifted her into the air, her giggles exploding into hiccups, and then he laughed. Not the laugh of a serious man, not the laugh of a powerful businessman. It was lighter, freer. The laugh of a man who, in that moment, was discovering that love wasn't just a word, it was a place, and that place looked very much like the arms of that woman and that child. Megan's gaze found his, and time stopped. Megan exhaled, her breath fogging the window. I think, she paused, then smiled, a little shy. I just want a peaceful life, a real home, to wake up knowing my daughter is safe and happy, to work, to watch her grow. And maybe, she glanced at him, then quickly away. Maybe even have someone. Her voice faltered, and she fumbled with the strap of her bag to cover it. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, charged with everything neither of them dared to say. And then, one afternoon, a moment that broke down all remaining walls. Philip opened the door to his mother's home and found them on the sofa. Isabel sat laughing in her lap, clapping her tiny hands as his mother smiled gently. Like this, my love, she was saying. Clap, clap. Very good. Grandma's smart girl. Megan stood in the doorway, frozen. Her hands trembled, and without even realizing, she lifted one to her face, catching a tear that slipped down, warm and stubborn. Something cracked open inside her. Not pain, not fear, belonging. Megan had never seen her daughter so surrounded by warmth, by care, by love. And beyond the scene, beyond the giggles and the claps, stood Philip, tall, steady, a man who seemed to carry the weight of the world, and yet in that moment carried something softer. His expression, gentle, almost tender, made something stir deep in Megan's chest, and with sudden clarity she realized her heart was no longer only hers. It belonged to him, too. For the first time in years, maybe ever, Megan felt life smiling back at her. Amid laughter, lingering glances, and silences richer than words, something new was blooming. Unspoken, undefined, but growing stronger with every passing day. It was one of those Sundays that seemed painted by a divine hand. A cloudless sky, a breeze carrying the scent of garden blossoms, the hum of life wrapped in stillness and warmth. At Philip's mother's house, everything felt enchanted, and it wasn't by chance. Mrs. Eleanor, her silver hair elegantly pinned, her eyes sharp with mischief, moved through the house like a woman with a plan. She had called it a simple lunch, but nothing about it was casual. The table was set with poetic care. White linen, gold-rimmed porcelain, polished cutlery glinting in the sun. At its center, a bouquet of white lilies and tea roses. The menu? Lasagna, roasted lamb, vibrant salads, warm bread, and of course, the famous red fruit cheesecake, a dessert Philip once said his mother only made on very special occasions. Soft jazz and romantic classics played from hidden speakers. Subtle, but unmistakable. The kind of soundtrack that made hearts beat just a little faster. When Megan arrived, holding Isabel's hand, her eyes lit up. The house was glowing, full of life, laughter, and something she hadn't felt in a long time: belonging. "Oh, dear, you're here," Eleanor exclaimed, wiping her hands on her floral apron. "How wonderful! Come, come, sit down." But just as Megan began to settle, Eleanor caught her arm with a conspiratorial wink. "Actually, Megan, come help me in the kitchen, will you?" Surprised, Megan blinked. "Of course." The moment they stepped into the kitchen, out of Philip's view, Eleanor turned to her. Leaning on the counter, arms crossed, a sly smile playing on her lips. "Megan," she began, sweet but unmistakably deliberate, "tell me something. Have you noticed how my son looks at you?" Color rushed to Megan's cheeks. No, she fumbled, clasping her hands together. "I don't know what you mean." Eleanor chuckled, shaking her head. The music, the scent of food, even the sunlight spilling through the windows. It all faded. There was only that look, deep, open, filled with things they hadn't yet dared to speak aloud. Without realizing it, she walked toward him. Philip, still holding Isabel, began to rise, and that's when it happened. At the exact moment he leaned forward and Megan bent down to reach for Isabel. Their faces collided, gently but unexpectedly. Forehead to forehead, nose to nose, breaths entwined. They both laughed, soft, nervous, slightly awkward. "Oh, sorry, Megan began, her hand flying to her lips. But she couldn't finish, because just then, Philip's eyes dropped from hers to her mouth, and hers did the same. Time suspended again. Without a word, he reached up, one hand brushing her cheek, holding her face with a reverence that made her heart ache. And then their lips met, tentative at first, as if asking, "Is this real?" Then firmer, more certain, a kiss full of everything unsaid. But fate, with its mysterious sense of timing, doesn't always wait for grand plans. Just 3 days before the proposal Philip and his mother had been secretly planning, Megan received a call. Her phone buzzed in the quiet of early morning as sunlight began spilling softly into the bedroom. Philip was still asleep, his arm draped protectively around her waist. The call was from an unknown number, but something, some instinct deep in her gut, told her to answer. "Hello?" she whispered, careful not to wake Philip. There was a pause. Then a voice she hadn't heard in over 3 years, brittle and strained, broke through. Megan, it's Daniel. Her heart stopped. Daniel, Isabel's biological father, the man who had disappeared without a trace the moment she had told him she was pregnant, the man who had left behind only silence and wounds she had tried so hard to heal. Her voice trembled. Why, are you calling me now? I've made mistakes, he said. I was scared, but I'm back now. I want to meet my daughter. Megan felt the ground beneath her shift. In the following days, the warmth of their new life continued, but inside, Megan was torn, between the past and the present, between the man who had left and the man who had held her hand when she thought she couldn't go on. And Philip, oh, Philip, he noticed the subtle shift, the way her smile didn't always reach her eyes, the way she would sometimes sit in silence, lost in thought. Finally, on a quiet evening when Isabel had fallen asleep between her two favorite people, Megan turned to Philip, her eyes glassy. I need to tell you something, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Philip sat up, instantly alert. She took a deep breath. Daniel called, Isabel's father. He wants to see her. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was heavier than that. It was the silence of someone measuring everything, his own feelings, her pain, and what was right for the child they both now loved. After a long pause, Philip said, What do you want? Megan looked at him, searching. I don't know. Part of me wants to slam the door in his face, but another part wonders, does Isabel deserve to know where she came from? Philip nodded slowly. Then whatever you decide, I'll be with you. I'm not going anywhere. She burst into tears, falling into his arms, overwhelmed by the complexity of love, how it could break and still somehow grow stronger. What none of them knew was that Daniel's return wasn't as simple as he made it seem. He wasn't just there to reconnect. He carried his own shadows and secrets. And before Philip could get down on one knee, fate was going to test this love in a way none of them saw coming. Daniel's return had turned everything upside down, but the love between Megan, Philip, and little Isabel was deep enough to overcome any obstacle. Philip stood by Megan every step of the way, and their bond only grew stronger despite the challenges. The day Philip asked Megan to marry him was more than just a question. It was a promise, a new beginning. Mrs. Eleanor took their hands and said, No matter what happens, your hearts are one, and that's the most beautiful thing. Then on a perfect day when the flowers bloomed and the sky was a clear blue, Philip looked into Megan's eyes, holding her hands gently and said, Megan, will you be my partner for life? Tears filled Megan's eyes, tears of happiness. Smiling through them, she answered, Yes, Philip. I've always wanted this. Isabel reached out to hold both their hands, and her little smile made the moment unforgettable. Life had given them everything: love, friendship, trials, and most importantly, a home where their hearts beat as one. And with that love, their journey continued, filled with hope, a fresh start, and endless possibilities.